A month ago, I found a photograph buried in the wrong case file. It was taken on a Saturday, the day before we recovered our missing hiker. The photo shows a creek, a rock shelf, a Douglas fir, the exact spot where we found him sitting Sunday morning. On Saturday, the spot is empty. No person, no footprints, no sign anyone had been there at all, but on the rock shelf, neatly folded, like someone had laid it out and left, is a sleeping bag. The same sleeping bag that was draped over his shoulders when we found him the next day. The man wasn't there, but something of his was. Waiting. I need to tell this story from the beginning, because every time I've tried, 3 times now, 3 different people, I start in the wrong place. I start with the man by the creek and people think it's a mistaken identity case. Some guy who looked similar. A field mix-up. It wasn't that. I need you to understand. It was never that. Marcus Webley, 31, experienced solo hiker. He signed the trail register at the Millbrook North Trailhead on a Tuesday morning in October. Listed his route, his return date, his emergency contact. He did everything right. All the things we tell people to do. He walked into the woods, and as far as I can tell, the real Marcus Webley never walked back out. When he didn't check in with his girlfriend Sarah by Thursday evening, she called us. By Friday morning, we had a team in the field. I was secondary on the operation. Danny Aldana was primary, 9 years more experienced than me, and not just procedurally competent, instinctively sharp. Most lost hikers drift downhill. They follow water. They make decisions that seem irrational but follow a kind of panic logic that Danny understood better than anyone I've worked with. She'd narrowed the probable search area by Friday afternoon. Saturday was day 2. 12 people in the field. 2 dog teams. A helicopter for a morning pass. Nothing. The dogs picked up scent near a junction about 4 miles in, then lost it. Circled. Couldn't reacquire. The helicopter spotted nothing. We expanded the grid. I spent most of the day working a drainage on the east side with a volunteer named Craig who talked too much about his divorce. I didn't mind. I preferred it to the silence. The radio staying quiet in a way that started feeling personal. By evening, we'd covered our sectors and come back empty. I stayed late doing paperwork, incident logs, resource allocation, the kind of documentation nobody reads unless something goes wrong. The station was empty by 8. Fluorescent lights buzzing. Radio turned up loud enough to hear static. I sat there staring at Marcus Webley's registration photo. He had this half smile, the kind people make when they know they're supposed to smile but aren't feeling it. I wondered where he was sleeping. I wondered if he was sleeping. But that wasn't what kept me awake. What kept me awake was something I wouldn't learn until later. Something a volunteer named Greg Hollis would eventually tell us. Something that, right then, on Saturday, was already happening in the drainage we thought was empty. I just didn't know it yet. Sunday morning, day 3. Danny pulled me aside before the briefing. She looked like she'd been up for hours. Coffee, no food. She'd printed a topographic map and drawn on it in 3 different colors of ink, which meant she'd been through at least 3 rounds of revision on her probability zones. She told me she had a bad feeling. I asked her what kind. She said she didn't know exactly, just that the math wasn't working. Webley was fit, he had gear, the weather had been mild. There was no reason we shouldn't have found him by now, or at least found something. A wrapper, a footprint, a piece of gear dropped on a scramble. But the wilderness had given us nothing, like he'd walked past the trailhead and the forest had just continued behind him without interruption. We split into 4 teams. I was leading the group working the creek system to the northwest. Around 11, maybe 11:15, Jake Purcell radioed from my team's far flank. He had a visual on someone. The walk to Jake's position took about 20 minutes, maybe 25. The drainage was rocky, the slope steeper than it looked. I remember feeling relieved in a way that loosened something in my chest I hadn't realized was tight. I decided to wait before radioing Danny. I didn't want to give her hope and then take it away. The man was sitting on a rock shelf near the creek with his back against a Douglas fir. He had a sleeping bag draped over his shoulders, neatly, like a shawl. He was calm, not injured calm, not shock calm, not the shaky, grateful calm of someone who's been alone and afraid and has just been found. Just calm. The way someone is calm when they've been waiting and the waiting is over and it went exactly the way they expected. Jake had already given him water. The man thanked him by name, which seemed odd until I remembered our jackets have name patches. Then he looked at me and said, "You're with the service too?" I said yes. He said, "I figured someone would come eventually." I got turned around near the switchbacks. I asked his name. He said, "Marcus Webley." And here's the thing. He looked right. Same build as the photos. Brown hair, a little longer than the registration photo, but that happens on trail. Right age range. Wearing gear consistent with what Sarah had described, down to the color of his rain shell, a specific shade of dark green I'd noted in my documentation. His pack contained a water filter, a headlamp, a first aid kit, food consistent with a multi-day hike, blisters from his boots. The boots were the right brand. Everything matched. I radioed Danny. Told her we had a male matching the description, responsive, ambulatory, identifying as our missing person. There was a pause on her end, maybe 2 seconds longer than it should have been. Then she said she'd meet us at the extraction point. During the walkout, the man talked. Not the way people usually talk after being lost, either frantic or not at all. He talked conversationally, described the switchbacks where he'd lost the trail, described a creek crossing I recognized accurately, the way the rocks were arranged, how the current pushed right. He mentioned a rock formation on the ridge that we use as a landmark internally, one that isn't on any published map. When I asked how he knew about it, he said he'd passed it on his second day. His description of it, approaching from the south, matched the topography perfectly. I should have felt good. Day 3 recovery. Ambulatory, coherent, no significant injuries. That's about as good as it gets. But walking next to him, I felt something I couldn't name. This low-frequency unease. Like walking into your house and finding everything exactly where you left it, but the air is different. That feeling was about to get worse. Danny was waiting at the extraction point, and she'd already noticed something I hadn't. At the extraction point, Danny took one look at him and something happened to her face. Fast. If I hadn't been watching, I'd have missed it. Her expression went through something I can only describe as a stutter, like a screen refreshing. Then she was professional again. Standard post-recovery questions. The man answered everything correctly. Emergency contact's phone number, home address, vehicle description and parking location, pack contents, cooperative, pleasant, patient. There was absolutely nothing wrong with any of it. That's what unsettled me. There should have been something wrong, even a little. People who've been lost for 4 days don't answer debrief questions like they're filling out a form at a doctor's office. Danny pulled me aside while the medic checked him over. She smelled like coffee and stale sweat, holding her 3-color map rolled up in one hand, like she'd forgotten it was there. She asked if I'd checked the trail register. I said I hadn't had a chance. She said she'd sent someone to the trailhead that morning. Routine documentation. They'd photographed the register. She showed me the photo on her phone. Webley's entry was there, dated Tuesday, his handwriting, his details. But Danny pointed to the lower corner of the page. A boot print. Muddy. Partial, but the tread pattern was distinct. She asked what boots the recovered man was wearing. I said I hadn't noted the model. She said Salomon X Ultra. Then she said the tread on the register was wrong for a Salomon. Too aggressive, More like a Merrill or a Keene. I said it could be anyone's boot print. She agreed. Then she said, but he told the medic he's wearing the same boots he started with. That was the first contradiction. By itself, it was nothing. But Danny didn't move on, and what she found next made the boot print look irrelevant. Danny took the man's account and plotted it against the topographic map that night. I came in Monday morning and she was still there, sitting at the briefing table with maps and incident logs and 2 empty coffee cups and an untouched sandwich. She looked up, and I could see she hadn't slept. Not from sadness, but from that kind of frustrated exhaustion where your eyes just stop cooperating. She told me she'd run the timeline. The man said he'd gotten lost Tuesday evening, moved south and downhill, sheltered by the creek since Friday, plausible at 2.5 miles per hour. But the dog teams had worked that exact drainage on Saturday. Both teams, opposite ends. Neither had picked up scent. I said maybe the wind was wrong. She said she'd confirmed conditions with the handlers. I said people miss things. She looked at me. The dogs don't miss things, not in a drainage like that. She was right. A narrow creek drainage is about as close to ideal scent conditions as you get. Moisture, contained airflow. The scent has nowhere to go. If someone had been sheltering there since Friday, both teams would have hit on it immediately. But the man was at the hospital. His vitals were normal. His girlfriend had been called. The rescue was documented and filed. A success. I'd radioed the confirmation. I'd walked him out. I'd signed off on the recovery. If Danny was right about the dogs, and I'd never known her to be wrong about fieldwork, then we'd recovered someone who wasn't in that drainage on Saturday, which meant either his timeline was wrong, or he'd appeared between Saturday evening and Sunday morning in a drainage that had been thoroughly searched. I didn't say that out loud. Neither did she, but that afternoon, Danny drove to the hospital for a follow-up, and she came back with more. The man had described Tuesday's weather accurately. Clear morning, clouds building, wind by evening. Danny checked the records. Correct. She'd asked about food. He said he'd brought 4 freeze-dried meals, eaten 2. His pack contained 3 unopened meals. I sat with that arithmetic for a minute. 4 minus 2 is 2, not 3. I said maybe he miscounted. Grabbed an extra without thinking. Danny nodded and wrote it down. I saw the list she was keeping. It was longer than I'd realized. Boot print, dog teams, food count, small things, each one explainable on its own. But they were accumulating, and they were all pulling in the same direction. I started thinking about whether any of it mattered. The man was safe. He was identified. He was going home. If he really was Marcus Webley, then all we had was a handful of the inconsistencies easily explained by stress and confusion. And if he wasn't, then what? What was I supposed to do? Who would I tell? And what would I say? That we had the wrong boot print on a register page and 1 extra freeze-dried meal? I started sleeping badly. I'd close my eyes and see the man by the creek, sitting with his sleeping bag draped neatly over his shoulders, smiling, calm, and my eyes would open and the clock would say 2:14, then 3:30, then 4:15, then my alarm. And that feeling, that low-frequency unease, wasn't fading. It was growing. Because on Tuesday, we called Sarah. Sarah was home with the man. She sounded happy, or trying to sound happy. Danny asked whether she'd noticed anything unusual about his behavior. A long pause. He's been really calm, Sarah said. Danny waited. Like, totally fine. I had a panic attack on Saturday about everything, the whole week, the waiting, and he just sat with me, held my hand. He wasn't upset at all. Another pause. He keeps saying he doesn't understand why everyone is making such a big deal out of it. I heard what she wasn't saying. After 4 days lost in the wilderness, people come back changed. Fragile, angry, hyper-vigilant. They have nightmares. They flinch at sounds. They don't come back fine. They don't come back better. Then Sarah said something I think about more often than anything else in this whole story. Quietly, almost to herself. Sometimes when he's in the other room, I forget he's there. Danny and I looked at each other. Neither of us responded. Danny moved the conversation to a follow-up appointment. But I wrote those words down later that night at the empty station. And I stared at them. And I thought about what it means when someone you love is in the next room and you can't feel them there. What does that feel like? Not absence. You'd notice absence. Something more like presence, without weight. A shape that fills a space but doesn't displace the air. Something that looks like a person, acts like a person, knows all the right things, but doesn't leave a mark on the silence when it moves through it. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid. Because a question had formed somewhere below my conscious mind, and it was pressing upward, and I wasn't ready to let it surface. Not yet. But the investigation wasn't done with us. Because the next lead was about to arrive, and for a brief, desperate moment, I thought it was going to explain everything. A hiker contacted the station, said he'd been on the North Ridge Trail Wednesday, the day after Webley disappeared, and heard someone calling for help. Faint from below the ridge, east side. Heard it twice, then nothing. He hadn't reported it because he assumed it was someone calling to a hiking partner. Danny and I spent a full day working the east slope. We found a campsite, fire ring, carefully built, ashes about a week old. Flattened ground where a tent had been, a candy bar wrapper wedged under a rock. I bagged the wrapper. Danny photographed the fire ring from 4 angles. I felt that specific kind of hope that comes from believing you're about to find the thing that makes everything make sense. Permit records showed a couple from Portland had camped that site on the relevant dates. They confirmed it when Danny called. The wrapper was a brand Webley hadn't listed. The tent impression was too large for his gear. The voice was probably one of them calling to the other. A full day on that lead. Danny spent 2. It meant nothing. But that's how investigations go. You follow a thread and it ends, and you're no closer, and slightly more tired and slightly more afraid. The dead end came before what happened next, and what happened next, I still can't explain. A trail camera on the North Ridge, 6 miles from the recovery site, had been checked for a wildlife survey. The team flagged an image from Wednesday afternoon, 3:47 p.m. A man walking north. Dark green rain shell, same pack, face in 3/4 profile, slightly blurred by motion, but clear enough. It looked like the man we'd recovered. It looked like Marcus Webley's registration photo. I don't know anymore if those are the same thing, because here's the problem. The recovered man said he'd been drifting south since Tuesday evening. He described a steady southward drift with specific landmarks that checked out. His account was internally consistent. It made geographical sense. The trail camera shows someone 6 miles north, at higher elevation, walking north with purpose on Wednesday afternoon. If the recovered man's account is true, he couldn't have been on that ridge. If the camera caught the same person, his entire timeline is a lie. And if it's a different person wearing the same dark green rain shell, carrying the same pack, with the same build and face, then who is in that photograph? Danny submitted the photo for comparison. Around this time, she stopped telling me what she shared with her supervisors. I think she was trying to protect me, or herself. Or maybe she'd realized that the more people who touched this, the more people would have to decide what they believed. And that was a weight she didn't want to distribute. I found her one evening in the conference room. She'd printed the trail camera image at multiple magnifications, 8 or 9 copies spread across the table. She was leaning over one with a red pen, circling something near the man's left hand. She hadn't turned the lights on, working by the glow of her laptop. I stood in the doorway, watched her trace the circle again. Tighter. then wider, like she kept changing her mind about what she was looking at. I said her name. She didn't flinch, didn't look up. She just said, "Does this look like a watch to you?" I looked. I couldn't tell. She nodded, like that confirmed something, and went back to circling. I didn't ask what it confirmed. I'm not sure I wanted to know. But the photograph was about to become the second most disturbing piece of evidence in this case. Because the next week, Greg Hollis walked into our station, and what he told us made everything worse. Greg Hollis, a volunteer from the search. He said something had been bothering him. Danny and I met him in the conference room. Greg said that on Saturday, day 2, the day before the recovery, he'd been working a sector on the south side of the drainage. He'd stopped to eat lunch on a ridge, looked down into the creek valley. He saw a man sitting by the creek, not moving, not signaling, not waving for help, just sitting, with something draped over his shoulders. I felt something cold move through my chest. Greg said he'd radioed it into his sector lead immediately. Danny pulled the radio logs. No record of Greg's transmission. Greg was certain. He described the exchange word for word. He'd said, "Possible visual contact, south drainage, individual sitting by creek." His sector lead, Tom Pham, had responded. Said he'd send someone. Danny called Tom. Tom had no memory of the call. Said Saturday was uneventful in his sector. Said he'd remember a sighting because that was the entire point. So either Greg imagined a detailed radio conversation that never happened, or Tom forgot a sighting report during an active search for a missing person, or the radio log failed to record a transmission for the first time in the history of that equipment. All 3 explanations were possible. None were comfortable, and none of them changed the fact that Greg described in precise detail the exact scene we found the next morning. The creek, the rock shelf, the man, the sleeping bag over his shoulders. One day before we got there, but remember, the dog team swept that drainage on Saturday. Both teams, neither found scent. So on Saturday, a volunteer sees a man by the creek. The dogs find nothing. The radio log records nothing. On Sunday, we find a man by the creek. Same spot, same posture, same sleeping bag, as if Saturday was a rehearsal or a preview or something I don't have a word for. After Greg left, Danny sat in the conference room for a long time. I sat with her. The building was empty. After 7, the lights had switched to half brightness, that energy-saving mode that makes everything look like a memory. I could hear the parking lot through the walls, which meant I could hear nothing. I said, "Maybe we should stop." Danny looked at me. Not angry, tired. "Stop what?" she said. I didn't have an answer, and neither did she, but the evidence wasn't finished arriving. November. A maintenance crew found it 12 miles north of the trailhead, wedged between rocks in a dry creek bed. A Merrill Moab, men's size 10, worn hard, the sole ground down on the outside edge. Webley's registration listed his boot size as 10. He'd listed Salomon's. The recovered man was wearing Salomons, but Sarah told Danny that Marcus had always worn down the outside edges of his shoes. Used to tease him about it. Said he went through sneakers twice as fast because of how he walked. The boot was 12 miles north. The man was found 2 miles south. The trail camera caught someone 6 miles north. The boot print at the trailhead register didn't match the shoes the recovered man was wearing, but it would match the boot found 12 miles away. The points didn't form a path. They didn't form anything. They were scattered across the landscape like someone had taken the facts of a single event and thrown them into the air and let them land wherever they fell. And somewhere in that scatter was the truth. I could feel it, the way you feel a word on the tip of your tongue. Close enough to sense the shape, too far to speak. Danny filed her report in late November. She didn't share the final version with me. I know it was long. I know it bothered the people above her because they called her in twice, and after the second meeting she came back and sat at her desk and didn't move for what felt like a very long time. They closed the case. Marcus Webley had been found. He was home. He was, by all accounts, adjusting well. Better than well. He'd returned to work, started hiking again, shorter trails. He told Sarah the experience had given him perspective. I asked Danny about the boot. Unconnected. The trail camera. Inconclusive. Greg's radio call, probably mistaken. She said all of it in a flat, careful voice, and I understood she'd been given the words and was using them, and there was nothing left of her in them. And what I didn't say, what I've never said to anyone until now, is this. We told Sarah it was over. We told her she could stop worrying. We walked a man out of the woods and handed him to her and said, "Here, this is him. He's safe." And she believed us, because we're the ones she was supposed to believe. If we were wrong, then we did that. We put something in her home and told her it was the person she loved. I thought about reopening the case once. Got as far as pulling the request form from the shared drive. Sat with it on my screen for 20 minutes, cursor blinking in the first field. And I realized I didn't know what I'd be searching for. The man was home. The man was fine. You can't file a report that says the person we found is wrong without being able to say what wrong means. The station got quiet after that. December, January. The Webley case settled into the filing cabinet like something sinking in cold water, slowly, until it was just another folder in a drawer nobody opened. I started spending more time alone, not intentionally. I'd stay late finishing reports that didn't need finishing, eat dinner at the station, something reheated from the gas station, and stare at the map on the wall, the one with Danny's colored ink still on it. I'd trace the routes we'd searched and the places we'd found things and the places we hadn't. One night, I noticed something in my own field notes from the recovery, a set of coordinates written in the margin of my incident report. I don't remember writing them. The handwriting is mine, but the coordinates don't correspond to the creek or the trailhead or the extraction point or any location I can identify on the map. They point to a spot about 9 miles northeast, in a part of the forest we never searched, outside every probability zone Danny drew. I don't know when I wrote them. I don't know why. I haven't gone to check. I'm not sure I could handle what I'd find. But I think about those coordinates every night. The way you think about a door in your house that you've never opened, one you're almost certain wasn't there before. And then in late January, something happened that made everything feel real again in the worst possible way. I saw the man at a grocery store in town. I was buying coffee, turned down an aisle, and he was standing in front of the pasta sauce, studying labels with a pleasant, unhurried focus. He looked healthy, rested. He looked good, better than the registration photo, like whatever happened in the woods had agreed with him. He saw me, and he smiled, and he said my first name, not my last name from a jacket patch, my first name, which I had never told him. I've gone through every interaction, every radio call, every conversation at the recovery, the extraction, the walk between. I never introduced myself by first name. It wasn't on my jacket. It wasn't on any document he had access to. He should not have known it. I said hello, asked how he was doing. He said really well. He said he and Sarah were talking about getting a dog. He said the experience had made him appreciate the smaller things. He said all of this standing perfectly still in the pasta aisle, relaxed, smiling, hands at his sides, and his eyes were warm and steady and so calm it was like looking at water that goes down further than you can see. I almost asked. The question was right there, physical, rising in my chest. I could feel its shape, not what happened out there, which would have been easy enough to deflect. Something worse. Something like, "Who are you?" Something I could never take back, because asking it would mean admitting what I actually thought. And admitting what I thought would mean everything we did was wrong. And everything we told Sarah was wrong. And the case that's closed should never have been closed. I didn't ask. The moment balanced and fell. He said something about the weather. I said something I don't remember. Then I was walking away. Then I was in my truck in the parking lot. Shaking. I sat there a long time. I wasn't afraid. Not exactly. It was something else. Something I still don't have a word for. The feeling of knowing something is wrong, and knowing you'll never prove it, and knowing the not proving will last the rest of your life. I think about Sarah. More than I should. I think about what she said on the phone, that sometimes when he's in the other room, she forgets he's there. I think about whether that's gotten better or worse. I think about calling her. And I never do. Because what would I say? I'm the ranger who brought him home. If I call and tell her I'm not sure, I've taken the only good thing she has and broken it, and I'd be doing it with nothing but a list of small contradictions and a feeling I can't prove. So I don't call. Dane transferred in March. Different district, different state. We don't talk often. When we do, we don't mention Millbrook. She texted me once, late, 2 or 3 in the morning. Her time. Do you ever think about the drainage? I typed yes and sent it. She never brought it up again. I think she left because she couldn't stop looking at the maps, because the maps didn't have answers and she couldn't stop asking. Because staying meant sitting in the same station where she'd filed a report saying something was wrong and been told nothing was wrong, and she couldn't accept that and couldn't change it. So she left. I didn't leave. I'm still here. Same station, same maps. Same filing cabinet with the same closed case in the same drawer. Some nights, when the building is empty and the radio is quiet and the parking lot is dark, I pull the drawer open and hold the folder and don't open it. Because I already know everything inside, and none of it helps. The case is closed. Marcus Webley is home. He is, by every measurable standard, fine. But there's something I haven't told you yet. Something Greg Hollis said during that meeting, something I wrote down later from memory, so I'm not sure the words are exact. He said when he looked down from the ridge on Saturday and saw the man by the creek, the man was looking up, directly at Greg, not squinting, not reacting, not startled, just looking, steady, patient. Like he already knew someone was there before Greg knew he was there. Like he'd been waiting for someone to look down. The dogs found no scent. The radio log recorded no call, but a man was sitting by the creek, perfectly still, looking up at the ridge, at the exact spot where a searcher happened to stop. Not hiding, not calling for help, waiting. And that brings me back to where I started. The photograph I found misfiled a month ago. A reference shot taken Saturday by someone on the team. The creek area, the day before the recovery. The rock shelf is empty, no person, no scent, no radio call in the logs. But on the rock shelf, neatly folded, is the sleeping bag. I've looked at that photograph more times than I can count. The sleeping bag is there. I'm almost certain it's the same one. The man isn't there. Not yet. But it was placed. Deliberately. Neatly. Like something was being prepared. And when we arrived Sunday morning, the man was sitting on that shelf with the sleeping bag over his shoulders like he'd always been there, smiling, calm, answering to a name that might or might not be his. I don't know who is living in Marcus Webley's house. I don't know where Marcus Webley is. I don't know what it means that the sleeping bag was there before the man. I don't know why a boot was found 12 miles north, worn down on the outside edge the way Marcus Webley wore his shoes, while the man we recovered was wearing different boots entirely. I don't know why the trail camera shows someone walking north on a day the recovered man says he was drifting south. I don't know why Greg's radio call doesn't exist. I don't know what coordinates I wrote in my own handwriting, or why they point somewhere we never looked. I know the case is closed. I know I helped close it. I know I told Sarah it was over, and she believed me, and I am no longer sure I told her the truth. I know the man in the grocery store knew my first name. When I dream about this, and I dream about it most nights, the dream is always the same. I'm walking toward the creek. Early morning, October light coming through the trees at that low angle that makes everything look golden and fragile, like the world is something that could break. I hear the water. I come around the last stand of fur and the man is already there, sitting on the rock shelf, sleeping bag over his shoulders, smiling, calm. In the dream, I understand something, not in words. The way you understand things in dreams, where the knowledge arrives whole, like it was waiting for you. I understand that he wasn't waiting for me. He was waiting for anyone. He just needed to be found. He needed someone to say, "This is the person we were looking for. The search is over." He needed someone to take him home. And I almost understand why. It's right there, behind something, like a shape behind frosted glass. I can feel how close it is. I reach for it. I almost have it. Then I wake up. My apartment is dark. My heart is going too fast, and there's something in my chest that feels like grief, except I don't know who it's for. The man on the rock shelf, calm and waiting. Or Marcus Webley, who signed a register on a Tuesday morning and did everything right and walked into the woods and hasn't come back. Or me, sitting in the dark, reaching for something I almost understood, feeling it slip away, knowing it won't come back, knowing I'll try again tomorrow night and the night after that, and I wonder where he is.